සියලුම SLT මොබිටෙල් සේවාවන් My SLT ඇප් එක හරහා කරගන්න. සියලුම SLT මොබිටෙල් සේවාවන් My SLT ඇප් එක හරහා කරගන්න.
දසනකාන්ති චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයුෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වළකයි.
Tonight, trade and investment. President Ranil Wickremesinghe expresses keenness to Japan on reviving cancelled projects, and to Singapore, the head of state pledged priority in making headway with FTA. Partners. ADB President says more support to Sri Lanka will be extended once IMF negotiations are completed successfully.
Once the negotiation with IMF is concluded, we will further consider to provide additional contributions to stabilize the Sri Lanka economy.
Consistency. PUCSL receives permission to purchase power from the private sector to ensure power cuts stay between 2 hours and 20 minutes after third unit of Lakvijay power plant breaks down. Gains. Sri Lanka's export earnings exceed $1.2 billion in August. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9. This Tuesday, the 27th of September 2022.
Vim Deara milliliter CA Smart Pack එක රුපියල් 85ට දැන් වෙළඳ පොලේ.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. I'm Andrew Bernard. Now, President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who is currently engaged in an official visit in Japan, held talks with the Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi, during which the Sri Lankan head of state expressed regret over the cancellation of several Japanese investment projects in Sri Lanka, but said he was keen to resume these projects again. The Japanese Foreign Minister meanwhile reiterated Japan's readiness to play a leading role in Sri Lanka's debt restructuring talks. In a separate meeting with the Singaporean Premier Hussein Long, in Tokyo, President Wickremesinghe pledged to prioritize implementing the Singapore-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement. Earlier today, President Ranil Wickremesinghe held talks with Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi in Tokyo this morning as part of his two-day official visit in Japan. During the meeting, Japanese Foreign Minister Hayashi welcomed the progress Sri Lanka has made with the International Monetary Fund and reiterated Japan's willingness to take a leading role in Sri Lanka's talks with creditor nations. President Wickremesinghe has meanwhile expressed regret over the breakdown of relations between Japan and Sri Lanka following the cancellation of several investment projects by the former government, and emphasized his keenness to restart the projects. The president also indicated that the government was interested in attracting Japanese investments to the island's renewable energy projects. In response, the Japanese foreign minister has explained that Japan had increased its commitment to renewable energy and would be willing to explore future investment opportunities in Sri Lanka. The foreign minister also explained that Japan would begin the skilled worker examinations in January next year for Sri Lankan migrant workers. The president appreciated the support extended by Japan at international fora and expressed the Sri Lankan government's willingness to support both Japan and India to become permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. The Japanese foreign minister, also welcoming the president's assurance, stressed that Asia required greater representation globally. Later in the day, President Wickremesinghe held talks with the Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Hsien Loong, during which the Sri Lankan president informed the Singaporean premier that his priority was to bring into effect the free trade agreement with Singapore. President Wickremesinghe said that an international trade office is being established in his office to handle matters related to the international trade and also to expedite free trade agreements. The Singaporean premier welcomed efforts towards the Singapore-Sri Lanka FTA and stated that Singapore was looking forward to investing in Sri Lanka once again. Meanwhile, President Wickremesinghe extended an invitation to the Singaporean Prime Minister to visit Sri Lanka next year when the country celebrates the 75th anniversary of independence. The president of the Asian Development Bank, Masatsugu Asakawa, said the ADB will consider to provide more assistance to Sri Lanka to stabilize the Sri Lankan economy once the negotiations with the International Monetary Fund concludes. Addressing reporters during a virtual media briefing, the ADB president said he hoped for Sri Lanka's negotiations with the global lender to conclude successfully.
ADB acknowledges the urgent need to address the debt sustainability in Sri Lanka, but not only Sri Lanka, but also in a couple of other countries as well. And I understand that right now Sri Lanka is negotiating a so-called EFF with IMF, and we are all hoping that negotiation with IMF would be really successfully concluded with very practical and effective policy action agreed between Sri Lanka and IMF. During that time, ADB is continuously providing loan by repurposing of the already existing loan in a pipeline, and also quite recently we approved the emergency loan to address the emergency need that the Sri Lanka government faces right now. And if and when once negotiation with IMF is concluded, we will further consider to provide additional contributions to stabilize the Sri Lanka economy along the lines with the policy agreed by everybody.
Now, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres offers support of the United Nations to mobilize assistance to Sri Lanka. The Secretary General extended support during discussions with Foreign Minister Ali Sabri on the sidelines of the 77th session of the United Nations in New York. The discussions between the Secretary General and the Sri Lankan Foreign Minister focused on the socio-economic challenges the country is facing. While Secretary General Antonio Guterres offered the UN support to mobilize assistance for the country, he also reiterated the importance of dialogue as the country moves forward. Foreign Minister Sabri meanwhile briefed the UN Secretary General on the steps being taken by the government to overcome the current challenges. Now, the Chinese government yesterday donated 8 fully equipped state-of-the-art mobile laboratory buses worth over 660 million rupees to assist in conducting early screening and detection of chronic kidney diseases in Sri Lankans. Meanwhile, the Chinese ambassador to Sri Lanka also handed over 650 million rupees worth of medicines and medical supplies to the country. He further mentioned that China will continue to assist Sri Lanka's health crisis and has extended supplies and medicines to reach the island nation's waters in the coming months with an accumulated value of 5 billion rupees.
The Chinese government handed over 8 fully equipped state-of-the-art mobile laboratory buses worth over 660 million rupees to the Ministry of Health for the diagnosis of chronic kidney disease in patients. The Chinese ambassador to Sri Lanka, Chi Chang-hong, officially handed over the mobile laboratory buses to the Minister of Health, Dr. Keheli Rambukwella, yesterday at the Colombo National Hospital premises. According to the Chinese embassy in Colombo, the 8 mobile laboratories of international standard are provided to regional health service directorates in Anuradhapura, Polonnaruwa, Vavuniya, Ampara, Kurunegala, Trincomalee, Matale and Badulla districts. Meanwhile, the Chinese ambassador also handed over 650 million rupees worth of drugs sent to Sri Lanka by the Chinese government. It was received in Sri Lanka as the first batch of the second phase of the Chinese relief program worth 5 billion rupees. The donation includes 17 types of essential medicines, including vaccines to prevent rabies. Speaking at the event, the Chinese ambassador said that the health sector of Sri Lanka has developed very satisfactorily in the last few years, even in the face of global epidemics and other crisis situations.
The health sector in Sri Lanka has endured tremendous pressure in the past few years. The widespreading pandemic and then the following economic crisis. I would like to sincerely applaud my Sri Lanka colleagues for your dedication and sacrifice, which lead the country towards victory in the fight against the pandemic. And I'm certain that with the same spirit and our collective efforts, the resilient Sri Lanka people will get through this economic hardship as well. In the coming months, more medicines and medical supplies will be delivered to Sri Lanka, together with a total value of 5 beanie rubies. I sincerely hope that those efforts can help the frontline health workers save lives across the country.
Meanwhile, Minister Rambukwala thanked the Chinese government for making such high-term donations for the health sector, emphasizing that it is extremely important at a time when Sri Lanka has reached an unprecedented difficult time in its history.
Your government have been always concerned about the activities of Sri Lanka, and you have never hesitated to assist us whenever it is necessary, and I don't think there is more opportune time than this to have this donation. This is the biggest ever grant of the Chinese grant next to the BMICH years ago. We are near a crisis. Only way that we can avoid the crisis is with the assistance that we get from all our friends all over the world, and Chinese government has been in the forefront of it. And today we have, I think, received the first batch of almost 5 billion worth of medicines.
The United States Permanent Representative to the UN Food and Agriculture Agencies in Rome, Ambassador Cindy McCain, says the recent $40 million assistance granted to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization will help farmers in Sri Lanka procure fertilizer to revitalize vital agricultural production. During an inspection with regard to the food security in the area of Kuliapitiya, Ambassador McCain also reiterated the commitment of the US to work with the government of Sri Lanka towards strengthening Sri Lanka's economy, while also addressing urgent humanitarian needs for the most vulnerable communities.
The United States Permanent Representative to the UN Food and Agriculture Agencies in Rome, Ambassador Cindy McCain visited Sri Revata Ratanapala Vidyalaya in Kuliapitiya to inspect the progress of the school vegetable garden, which is part of the International Horticultural Program jointly conducted with the World Food Program.
There's a lot going on with regard to the UN-funded projects, but as always, there's not enough. The United States most recently gave $40 million for fertilizer, so that will have an impact here on the lack of fertilizer and on the inability for our farmers that we just talked to grow. So that will help a great deal. We want to make sure that the United States continues to be not only supportive but proactive on all of the issues that face Sri Lanka with regards to food, agriculture, and hunger. Food security everywhere is a problem, and as you know, here there are 6.3 million people that are food insecure right now in Sri Lanka. So what we can do is to continue what we're doing and expand, talk to our good friends at FAO, our partners at WFP, and other EFAT as well, trying to make sure that we're all working together, making sure that everyone's a beneficiary in all of this. And most of all, reminding everyone here that the Sri Lankan people need help.
Food insecurity and economic crisis is apparent to all right now, and it's touching almost every family in the country. So what we want to do is not only work with government, but work with the private sector, with civil society, with local schools and communities. We've worked with private U.S. sector companies to do small community garden projects as well. We've worked with the Colombo mayor to create community gardens to provide that food and vegetables to whoever we can. So I think it's a responsibility of all of us and all of us in the community to help those who we can in every way that we can. And we're in close communications with government agencies and ministries to do that.
We'll be back with more news after this short break. Stay with us.
අයිනෝ පුතා හැබැයි යා ගෙදර නිදියන්නෙම අමෝතු තැනක.
කාලගුණය කොහොමුණත් රයිනෝ නං වහලට සේෆ් තමයි මුළු ගෙදරම. Rhino Cement Roofing Sheets. Then you know Rhino. I know.
Big 3.
Uber Eats මගින් ඉදිරිපත් කරන ආදරයෙන් අවශ්‍යතා ඇති අයට අත්‍යවශ්‍ය භාණ්ඩ පරිත්‍යාග කිරීමට වේදිකාවක්.
Welcome back. The chairman of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna and member of the SLPP's independent group in Parliament, Professor G.L. Peiris, criticizes the government's declaration of high security zones in Colombo, stating that it restricts people from exercising their fundamental rights vested by the Constitution. Speaking at a media briefing today, Professor Peiris went on to say that the Official Secrets Act, under which the government declared the high security zones, does not have the provisions to empower such a move.
The Official Secrets Act under which the government claims to take these measures has absolutely nothing to do with the declaration of high security zones. So the government has acted under a statute which has been enacted for a completely different purpose, that is to protect the confidentiality of government materials such as cabinet minutes and so on. In all these security zones around Colombo, there is a prohibition that is imposed on gatherings, meetings, expression of views, expression of dissent, the freedom of association, all of which are guaranteed by the highest law of the land, Article 14 of the Constitution. Now, yesterday I heard an amazing statement by the Acting Minister of Defense. The Acting Minister of Defense is telling us there is nothing to worry about, because all these rights can be enjoyed subject to obtaining permission from the police, seeking this permission 6 hours before the planned meeting or demonstration. I want to tell the Acting Minister of Defense that these are rights that we all enjoy, not a matter of leave and license, not because of anybody's kindness or anybody's permission. We don't need permission from anybody to enjoy the fundamental rights that are conferred upon us by the Constitution. Now, in these areas which have been declared as high security zones, you have residential areas and you have commercial areas. Now, this says that when called upon by the police to do so, the householder has to make available to the police a list of the occupants of his house. You have to do it within 24 hours. If you don't do it, you are guilty of a criminal offense. Now, with regard to commercial establishments, the directors of the company, the employees, a full list has to be made available to the police upon demand. Then, all construction is stopped in these areas, including temporary structures. No building whatsoever without the permission of the police. Construction sector will come to a grinding halt. You can't build anything. Say you are in one of these security areas. If the police feel with or without reason that you may have committed an offense under these regulations, they have the right to interrogate you. They can stop you, question you, they can hold an inquiry. They can enter any building within this area without a warrant on mere suspicion. What happens to our basic individual rights?
Now, the national grid was deprived of another 270 megawatts of power today after the third unit of the coal-powered Norachole power plant was shut down following a mechanical issue that had worsened today in one of the boilers. However, the Public Utilities Commission stated that power interruptions will be maintained at 2 hours and 20 minutes in the coming days, as it had been given the go-ahead to purchase power from the private sector. Due to a mechanical issue in the third unit of the Norachole power plant, the plant is once again unable to produce the power expected of the plant. It is reported that the third unit of the coal-powered plant was shut down at around 1 am, after a pump in one of the boilers had begun letting off steam. The issue had reportedly persisted in the past 3 days, with water spraying from the pump last night. A spokesperson at the Ceylon Electricity Board stated that if the third unit was not shut down, it would have caused more damages. Due to this issue, the national grid has been deprived of 270 megawatts of power. Currently, the Norachole power plant is producing the power required to the national grid using the first unit only due to the second undergoing repairs. Chairman of the CB Engineers Union, Saumya Kumara Vaduge, stated that this had taken place as a result of the machinery not being subject to mandatory servicing required back in 2018. Due to the low contribution of power to the national grid, the Public Utilities Commission stated that power cuts today had to be extended.
පැය 2යි විනාඩි 20ක් තිබුණු විදුලි කප්පාදුව අද දිනට පමණක් පැය 3ක් දක්වා දීර්ඝ කරලා නැවතත් හෙට දිනේ සිට පැය 2යි විනාඩි 20ක් දක්වා අඩු කිරීමේ ක්‍රමවේදයකට තමයි අපි යන්නේ. ඒ සඳහා අවශ්‍ය නැප්ත ප්‍රමාණය, ඩීසල් ප්‍රමාණය මේ වෙන වෙලාවට ලැබිලා තියෙනවා. ඒත් අපිට දවසක් විතර යනවා මේ නවත්වලා තියෙන විදුලි බලාගාර නැවතත් සක්‍රිය බවට පත් කරගන්න දවසක් විතරයි. ඒ නිසා ඊටත් අමතරව මහජන උපිතා කොමිසමේ සමාජිකයන්ගේ අනුමැතිය ලැබුණා. මේ අවස්ථාවේ ඇතිලා තියෙන හදිසි තත්වයෙන් ගොඩ ඒම සඳහා ඊළඟ දවස් කිහිපය සඳහා අවශ්‍ය විදුලිය පුද්ගලික අංශයෙන් ලබාගෙන මේ තත්වය විදුලි කප්පාදු අඩු කරගෙන යෑමේ හැකියාව අපිට දැන් තියෙනවා.
In the meantime, Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara said that the remaining cargo from last year's coal tender has been expedited to fulfill the immediate requirements of Norachole. He added that an advance payment for the first cargo was made today and that a long-term tender and a spot tender will be advertised this week for the full requirements. Now, President Ranil Wickremesinghe says allowing the Chinese research vessel Yuanwang 5 to dock at Hambantota port was a difficult decision for Sri Lanka, adding that the government needed a basis to change the approval that was given at the very end by former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's tenure. In an exclusive interview with Strat News Global of India, the President said Sri Lanka informed India that Sri Lanka will not do anything that will jeopardize India's security.
The problem of that Chinese ship docking in Hambantota happened. And India, of course, had its objections. How did you handle that? And do you think it could have been handled differently?
Firstly, Hambantota is not a military harbour. We have not been giving it out for military purposes. This ship had been approved earlier, just as at the very end of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's tenure. And it had come in as a research. So that's how it had been okay. We are inquiring into it, how this happened so fast. Now we have said no objections. So once that had happened and I had taken over.
Right.
And if we were to change that decision, we needed some basis. If that had been forthcoming, we could have studied it and taken a decision. But that was not available. And then we couldn't get into an argument which we were going to lose. We did delay its coming in here. And then, of course, by that time, the ship was virtually in our waters. It was a difficult decision, but it was in keeping with our policy that once we give permission, that there must be some reason for us to withdraw permission. So that we could not find the reasons. We asked your government also, and they had virtually come up to the area. What they said is that they are not going to do anything harmful to India.
Okay.
But that was in our waters. Outside that, if they had this equipment and they wanted to spy on India, they could have done it. We could only assure that, and we are confident nothing took place like that.
Did you have a very frank dialogue with India at that point in time?
Yes, we did. I told them.
And they were finally understanding about it when...
I don't think they were happy, but they accepted the situation. What we have told India is that we will not do anything that will jeopardize the security of India. And so far, Sri Lanka hasn't done. I mean, this government or the other governments. We haven't done that, and we are very, very careful.
I've heard you saying this at that National Defence College lecture also, that we are not here to jeopardize India's security. I think you also used a very interesting term, don't use Hambantota as a punching bag.
That's true.
But is it being used as a punching bag?
We are getting hammered for Hambantota, directly and indirectly everywhere. So first, so I said, yeah.
Welcome back. Now, business confidence in Sri Lanka for the month of September slumped despite the country reaching a staff-level agreement with the International Monetary Fund. According to LMD Nielsen IQ Business Confidence Index for the month of September, it was 5 points lower compared to the last month.
The LMD Nielsen IQ Business Confidence Index for the month of September in Sri Lanka was low despite a high level of confidence depicted last month. According to the index, it stands at 76, down 5 basis points from August's 81 in the month of September. 12 months ago, the barometer stood at 104 basis points and by and large climbed steadily until March this year. Following the 2022 interim budget and with the IMF loan agreement expected to be sealed by the end of the year, people of the country will have to make more sacrifices once deal is sealed. However, LMD says the silver lining to business confidence in the country is provided by the 5% who view the investment climate in the country as good and the 10% who consider it to be fair, which they believe is a sign that they expect the confidence to boost in the coming days. This is a notable degree of optimism from a group of whom only 2% said it was fair a month ago and no one thought the investment climate was good.
Development Board said earnings from export increased by 10.2% year-on-year to $1.23 billion in August, mainly to the increased earnings from export of apparel and textiles.
Major product sectors except coconut-based products, which include apparel and textiles, tea, rubber-based products, electrical and electronic components, spices and concentrates, diamonds, gems and jewelry, food and beverages, seafood and ornamental fish recorded increased exports in August 2022. Exports of apparel and textiles increased by 15.03% year-on-year to $565.37 million in August 2022, mainly driven by exports in apparel. Export earnings from tea in August 2022, which made up to 11% of merchandise exports, increased by 6.52% year-on-year to $124.41 million. For the period of January to August 2022, merchandise exports increased by 12.04% to $8,853 million compared to the corresponding period of 2021. Major product sectors except tea, rubber-based products and spices and concentrates, which include apparel and textiles, coconut-based products, electronics and electronic components, gems and jewelry, food and beverages, and seafood recorded an increase during this period. Between January to August 2022, apparel and textile exports increased by 19.3% to $4,082.81 million compared to the same period of 2021. Meanwhile, export earnings from rubber and rubber finished products slightly decreased by 0.46% to $705.7 million in between January to August 2022 compared with the same period of 2021, which was due to lower exports of industrial and surgical gloves. However, exports of pneumatic and retreated rubber tires and tubes increased by 9.42% during the period of January to August 2022 compared to the same period of 2021, while earnings from export of electrical and electronic components increased by 11.87% to $311.17 million in the period from January to August 2022 compared to the same period in 2021.
Now, Colombo's all-share price index closed in green as a result of price gains in counters such as Commercial Bank, ACL Cables and Hatton National Bank, with turnover crossing 5.8 billion rupees. A similar behavior was witnessed in the S&P SL20, with crossing witnessed in Expo Lanka Holdings, Commercial Bank and Central Finance Company, accounting for 45.2% of turnover. Furthermore, foreigners remained active, closing as net buyers. Transportation sector was the top contributor to the market turnover, whilst the sector gained 0.44%. Capital goods sector was the second highest contributor to the market turnover, whilst the sector index decreased 0.35%. Now, the Sri Lankan rupee remains steady at 362.9 against the US dollar today. The rupee remained unchanged since the 16th of September due to tight controls maintained by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Meanwhile, the euro was at 349.4 today, appreciating from 350.63 cents, while the rupee depreciated against the sterling to 390.32 cents from 383 rupees and 84 cents yesterday. Now, after falling to a 9-month low yesterday on recession expectations triggered by rate hikes around the world, oil prices rebounded today off the back of supply cuts in the US due to Hurricane Ian and a brief pause in the dollar climb to a 20-year high.
Oil rose more than 1% today from a 9-month low a day earlier, supported by supply curbs in the US Gulf of Mexico ahead of Hurricane Ian and a slight softening of the US dollar. Analyst expectations are that OPEC Plus may take action to stem the drop in prices by cutting supply, which also lends support. OPEC Plus will meet to set policy on the 5th of October. Brent crude rose $1.11 to $85.17 a barrel by 8:10 a.m. GMT. Yesterday, it fell to as low as $83.65, the lowest since January. US West Texas Intermediate crude was up $1.08 at $77.79. Crude soared in early 2022, with Brent coming close to an all-time high of $147 in March after Russia invaded Ukraine, adding to supply concerns. Worries about recessions, high interest rates, and dollar strength have since waned.
Now, soaring to a 20-year high last Thursday subsequent to the Fed rate hike, the US dollar took a pause today as other major currencies worldwide made gains.
The dollar took a pause in what has been a relentless climb higher as the euro and even the Japanese yen and the British pound managed to recover a little ground, but medium-term fundamentals were still in the greenback's favour. The euro rose 0.42% to $0.9647, but still near its 20-year low hit the day before, and the UK sterling climbed nearly 1% to $1.0783, not too far from its record low against the US dollar hit yesterday. The yen was just off its 24-year all-time low hit last week before the Japanese authorities intervened to strengthen the currency. the dollar slid 0.33% against the yen to 144.25. The Australian dollar and the New Zealand dollar, which hit 2.5-year lows yesterday, were also on the rebound, with the Australian dollar up 0.57% to $0.6490 and the New Zealand dollar up 1.2% to $0.5702. These moves were minor, however, compared to the multi-year lows at which all three currencies are languishing.
That's all the news we have for you tonight. Join us again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.